Voicemail from my landlord stopped me cold in the middle of a Chicago O'Hare terminal, my carry-on still rolling behind me. People streaming past like I wasn't even there. Not my landlord. My landlord doesn't call me. I own my house outright. I stood there, bag handle still in my grip, and played it again. Hi, this message is for the owner of the property at 4412 Birchwood Lane. This is Lawrence Feldman from Feldman Property Management. We've been contracted by the new owners to handle tenant placement, and we'd like to schedule a walkthrough before listing. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. New owners. I had been in Portland for 11 months. My company, a mid-sized logistics firm, had sent me to oversee a regional expansion, and I'd agreed because it was supposed to be temporary. 11 months felt long, but I had a house. I had a mortgage-free, 3-bedroom Craftsman in a suburb of Chicago that I had bought 4 years ago with the $290,000 I saved over 8 years of working 60-hour weeks as a financial compliance analyst. It was mine. Completely, legally. Paperwork in a fireproof safe mine. I called back immediately. Lawrence Feldman answered on the second ring and cheerfully explained that the property at 4411 Birchwood Lane had been purchased 6 weeks ago by an LLC called Birchwood Capital Partners. The closing had gone through without issue. Did I have a question about rental rates in the area? I hung up. I sat down on a bench near gate key 7 and called my sister. She picked up on the 4th ring, and I heard noise in the background. Music, people talking. It sounded like a party. Hey, you're back? She said. Not surprised. Not warm. Like I'd walked in from the grocery store. Where is my house? I said. Silence. Then the background noise got quieter, like she'd stepped into another room. We need to talk in person, she said. Tell me right now. Another pause. And then she said, and I will never forget this for as long as I live. It wasn't doing anything sitting empty. I got us a really good price and I needed the capital. I figured you'd understand eventually. I needed the capital. She sold my house. My sister sold my house while I was 11 months away working, and her explanation, delivered in the same tone she used to ask me to cover her half of the restaurant bill, was that she figured I'd understand eventually. I didn't say anything. I ended the call, sat in that airport terminal, and for about 3 minutes I cannot move or think or breathe correctly. Then I opened my banking app. My savings account, which my sister had access to as an emergency contact, a joint account I'd set up when I had a health scare 2 years ago, showed a balance of $4,212. It had held $67,000 the last time I checked. I called my mother. She answered immediately, and I could tell from her voice she'd been waiting. Sweetheart, before you say anything, did you know? A pause that lasted exactly long enough to answer my question without words. She was in trouble, my mother said. Real trouble. Her business was going under and she didn't want to tell you because you'd have lectured her. She needed liquidity fast. We thought that you'd come home, see she'd handled it, and we could figure out paying you back over time. She forged my signature on a real estate transfer and drained my savings account. She's your sister. I thought about my compliance work. I think about it in moments like that. The way other people might reach for a drink or a prayer. As a framework, a way of ordering chaos into something I can analyze and act on. My job, essentially, is to find where money went, that it wasn't supposed to go, and to trace every step of how it got there. I have testified in federal proceedings. I have found embezzlement in organizations that had 4 different audit layers. I have sat across from people who were very certain they had covered their tracks and watched them realize, slowly, that they had not. My sister knew what I did for a living. She had always found it a little boring, a little bloodless, a little too much about paperwork, and not enough about people. She had never once considered what it might mean if I turned that skill set toward her. I booked a hotel near O'Hare instead of going home because I didn't have a home to go to. I ordered room service. I didn't eat and sat at the desk with my laptop and started pulling every thread I could access from the outside. The property records were public. The deed transfer had gone through a title company in the western suburbs. and the signature on the transfer document, my signature, was wrong in 3 specific ways that I cataloged immediately. The angle of the downstroke on my last name, the gap I always leave between the 2 loops of my first initial, the way I write the date, always day, month, year, from a habit I picked up from a British colleague years ago. The forged signature was close. It was not close enough. The LLC, Birchwood Capital Partners, had been formed 8 weeks before the sale closed. Its registered agent was a business formation service in Delaware, which is entirely common and tells you nothing by itself. But the operating address listed on the Articles of Organization was a P.O. box in Naperville, Illinois. My sister lived in Naperville. The savings account withdrawal had been processed in 3 separate transactions over 6 days, each one just under the $10,000 federal reporting threshold. That is not a coincidence. That is someone who Googled structuring laws and thought that knowing about them was the same as knowing how to avoid triggering them. It is not. I called an attorney at 8 in the morning. Her name was Beverly O.C., and a colleague had mentioned her once in the context of a real estate fraud case. I explained the situation in as few words as possible. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Do you have documentation of your original purchase?" "I have everything." "Good. Don't contact your sister again. Don't contact your mother. Don't post anything. Can you come in today?" I was in her office by 10. Beverly laid out the landscape clearly. The forged deed was the central issue. It was fraud. Full stop, and it would unwind the sale. The buyers, a young couple who had apparently been told nothing unusual about the transaction, had title insurance, which meant they were protected financially, even if the deed was invalidated. I would need to make my case to the court, and there would be a period of legal limbo during which technically 2 parties had a claim to the property. But the outcome, given what I had, was not in serious doubt. The savings account was a separate matter. Wire fraud, potentially bank fraud depending on how she'd accessed it, and a civil suit for the full amount plus damages. "Your sister made one very large mistake," Beverly said. "She made several. The largest one," Beverly said, "is that she sold to a buyer who went through a legitimate title company and purchased title insurance. That creates a paper trail she can't erase. If she'd sold to a cash buyer off-market, this would be significantly messier. She thought she was being smart. She was actually making it easier for you." I spent the next 2 weeks doing 2 things simultaneously, working remotely from my hotel room, because I still had a job and responsibilities, and feeding Beverly every piece of documentation she asked for. Bank statements, the original deed, the mortgage payoff letter from 4 years ago, photos of my signature from signed documents going back a decade, my passport stamps proving I was in Portland when the transfer closed. My mother called 6 times. I didn't answer. My sister texted me 11 times. The messages started conciliatory and got progressively more aggrieved. By the 3rd day, she was telling me that I'd always been selfish, that I'd never supported her business, that the money I made felt like luck compared to the real work she'd been doing building something. By the 6th day, she said that I was destroying the family over a house. By the 8th day, she stopped texting. My aunt called too. I love my aunt, but she was calling to ask me to think about what this was doing to my mother, and I said, very calmly, that I was thinking about what my mother's silence had done to me, and I thanked her and ended the call. The thing people don't understand about family betrayals, and I've talked to enough people in the aftermath of mine to know this is nearly universal, is that it's not the original act that breaks you. You can be furious about the act. The act is almost comprehensible in a horrible way because people get desperate, and desperate people do things they shouldn't. What breaks you is the response. It's the phone call where your mother says, "She is your sister," as though that phrase is an answer. It's the text from your sister about your selfishness. It's the way everyone in the circle treats the person who is robbed as the person who needs to calm down. I did not calm down. I kept my voice level, I kept my documentation organized, and I did not calm down in any meaningful sense for a long time. The court process moved faster than I expected, partly because Beverly was very good and partly because the evidence was so clean. The deed was invalidated. The title insurance paid out to the buyers, which meant they did not lose money, which meant my sister's crime caused them significant disruption and stress, but not financial ruin. Something I was grateful for, and something that, frankly, probably kept my sister's situation from being even worse. A fraudulent real estate transfer without an injured third-party buyer is a slightly less acute situation than one with a family who lost their down payment. The insurance company, however, was now suing my sister for the full recovery amount. That was not my doing. That was consequence. The savings account case was cleaner still. Beverly's colleague, a fraud attorney named Marcus Webb, handled that portion. The bank had records of everything. My sister hadn't even used a VPN. She had accessed the joint account from her home IP address, transferred the money to an account in her business's name, and then moved it again within 48 hours. Marcus described this to me with the particular restraint of someone trying not to say she was incredibly sloppy to the person who was victimized by the sloppiness. I asked if I should feel grateful she was sloppy. He said, in this case, yes. My sister was charged with forgery, wire fraud, and theft by deception. She was arraigned on a Tuesday morning. My mother called me that evening and cried for 20 minutes. I listened, and when she was done, I said, I need you to understand that I didn't do this to her. She did this. I just didn't cover it up. My mother said, she's my daughter. I said, I'm your daughter too. She didn't have an answer for that. I don't think she thought about it in those terms. Or maybe she had, and that was the problem. There's a particular restaurant in Naperville, a nice one, the kind with cloth napkins and a wine list and a prix-fixe option on weekends, where my sister celebrated her business's launch 4 years ago. I was there. I paid for her table of 8 because she asked me to, and I said yes because I was doing well and she was my sister, and that's what you do. I remember feeling proud of her that night. Her pitch was good. Her vision was interesting. I believed in her. About 3 weeks after her arraignment, I was having dinner with Beverly and Marcus at a restaurant across the street from that one, because Beverly had chosen it and I hadn't said anything, and I looked out the window and saw my sister walking in with 2 friends, laughing at something on her phone. I watched her for a moment through the glass. Beverly noticed where I was looking. She didn't say anything. I turned back to my food and said, I'm going to need to sell my stake in the joint savings account and close it out completely once the civil judgment clears. Beverly nodded and said that was straightforward. And I want to make sure the restitution order covers the fair market appreciation of the property over the period it was wrongfully transferred, not just what she sold it for. Beverly smiled slightly and said, already in the filing. I went back to the hotel that night and sat in the chair by the window and thought about my sister at 22, teaching me to parallel park in an empty shopping mall parking lot on a Sunday morning, because our father worked weekends and our mother didn't drive. She'd been patient. She'd laughed when I hit the cone, the good kind of laugh, not the unkind canned. She'd bought us breakfast sandwiches after. I had loved her so much that morning. I had thought, driving home with my new parking skills and egg on my shirt, that I was lucky to have someone in my corner like that. I don't know what happened to that person. I don't know if she was ever fully that person, or if I was seeing what I wanted to see. I think she got scared and made a catastrophically wrong choice, and then kept making wrong choices to protect the first one, and somewhere in there the person I thought I knew stopped being findable. That's not me forgiving her. That's just me trying to understand the timeline, because understanding timelines is how I make sense of things. The property came back to me 4 months after I filed. The court order cleared on a Thursday, and Beverly called me at work to tell me, and I sat in my Portland office for a moment before I responded. My colleague at the next desk looked over and asked if I was okay. I said I was. I listed the house for sale the following month. I didn't want to live there anymore. I'd been in Portland long enough to know the city felt like mine in a way Chicago no longer did. And I sold it at a number that was higher than what my sister had gotten, because the market had moved, and because my real estate agent was excellent, and because I had the patience to wait for the right buyer. The final number was enough to cover the deposit on a place in Portland, close out every financial entanglement I had with my family, and give me the kind of breathing room I hadn't felt in the 11 months since I'd listened to that voicemail in the airport. My sister's criminal case is ongoing, She took a plea deal that her attorney negotiated down from the original charges, and she will serve community service and be under financial supervision for 3 years. The insurance company's civil recovery suit against her is separate and will take longer. I was not party to the plea negotiation, and I have not spoken to her since the arraignment. My mother and I speak occasionally. It is not what it was. I don't think it will be again. Not entirely. She loves both of us. I know that. And I understand the position she was in. But understanding a position and trusting someone again are different things. And trust is built in specific ways that require specific actions. And those actions have not happened. Maybe they will. I'm not optimistic, but I'm not closed off either. I'm just honest about where things are. What I know is this. I worked for 8 years to buy that house. I did everything right. I was cautious and deliberate and patient. And none of that protected me from someone who saw my absence as an opportunity and my trust as a loophole. The financial system I understand professionally, the documentation, the paper trails, the signatures and records and transfer notices, those things protected me in the end, but only because I knew how to use them. Most people wouldn't have known where to start. If you have a family member with access to your accounts, I am not saying assume the worst. I'm saying check your settings. I'm saying know what your joint account authorizations actually permit. I'm saying take a photograph of your signature and save it somewhere. I'm saying that a power of attorney can be a gift to someone you trust and a weapon in the hands of someone you shouldn't. I'm saying that the version of trust I had in my family felt like love and turned out to be a vulnerability. I'm still figuring out what I want to build in its place. The Portland apartment has big windows that face west. I watch the sun go down over the hills most evenings if I'm home in time. It's a good city. The coffee is better than anywhere I've lived, and the people leave you alone in the way that feels respectful rather than cold. I have a dinner reservation for next week with 2 friends I meet here. One of them is a public defender. The other restores furniture and always smells faintly of wood stain. Neither of them has ever asked me for anything I wasn't prepared to give. That right now feels like enough. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the voicemail, not the bank balance showing $4,212, where $67,000 used to be. It's the parking lot of a shopping mall, a Sunday morning maybe, 15 years ago, my sister patient in the passenger seat, while I kept overcorrecting into a cone, both of us laughing. She bought us breakfast sandwiches after. I thought, driving home that day, that I was one of the lucky ones. I don't tell that story to make myself seem naive. I tell it because I think the distance between who someone is at their best and what they're capable of at their worst is something most of us underestimate, especially when the person is someone we love. My sister wasn't a villain in a parking lot. She became one later, slowly, through a series of choices that each probably felt smaller than they were, until the choices added up to a forged deed and a drained bank account, and a phone call where she told me she figured I'd understand eventually. What I've come to believe, not from this experience alone, but from years of work that requires me to trace exactly how people go wrong, is that most betrayals don't start with bad character. They start with a moment of panic and a person who hasn't built the internal structure to handle it honestly. My sister's business was failing. That part was real. The panic was real, but there are 100 ways to respond to that kind of fear, and the one she chose was to reach for something that wasn't hers, and then to lie, and then to keep lying, and then to let her mother lie alongside her. Each step made the next one easier. That's how it works. Not a villain's decision, but a coward's accumulation. I'm not absolved of anything by having been the one wronged. I've thought hard about what I could have done differently, not to prevent what she did, because that wasn't mine to prevent, but to have seen it coming. I trusted without verifying. I gave account access because I loved her and didn't consider that love and reliability are different things. That's not self-blame. That's just the honest accounting of how I'll approach trust differently from here. What saved me wasn't luck. It was 8 years of discipline that built the asset in the first place, and then the knowledge, hard-earned, professionally developed, to know exactly what a paper trail looks like and how to follow one. There's something I believe deeply about that. The skills you build with integrity become your defense when someone without it comes for you. I didn't build my career or my savings to protect myself from my family. But when I needed to, those things protected me anyway. I also had to stay steady when every instinct said to call, to confront, to make her understand. I didn't. I documented. I retained counsel. I let the process work. That kind of discipline, the willingness to hold yourself back from the emotionally satisfying move in favor of the strategically correct one, is something I had to practice in real time, under real pressure, and I don't think I would have managed it 10 years ago. My mother and I are in a different place now. Maybe we'll find our way back to something real. Maybe we won't. I've stopped making that outcome the thing I'm working toward. What I'm working toward is simpler. Building a life where the people around me have earned their place in it, and where I've been honest enough with myself to know the difference. The Portland apartment has west-facing windows. The sun sets over the hills most evenings, and when I'm home in time I watch it. It's a quiet thing to be grateful for. But I am,